And we're very fortunate to have them with us today. Ronen, Orna, thank you so much for being on The Rev and the Rabbi.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Yes, we're happy to be back.
So I guess you're often asked the question, where do you get the strength? I hate the word closure. I think closure is just the wrong word to ever use when someone undergoes such a painful loss. But where do you get the strength to continue to rebuild your lives? Different, but where does it come from?
Well, let me remind your listeners that on October 7, 250 people were taken out of the beds and taken hostage. We found ourselves as New Yorkers living here, a son born in New York, raised on Long Island within a very warm community. And we found ourselves all of a sudden in one of the biggest crises in the world, one of the largest numbers of hostages. And we live here in the United States and we ask ourselves, what are we doing? And we understood immediately that we have a special role. Our son is a American citizen, and we immediately activated some of the members of the community, and we reached Washington. And we know that on October 8th, already a day later, Secretary Blinken had a letter in his hand notifying him that there is a crisis in the Middle East, among them many Americans that were abducted, and the mission that we had in front of us really kept us going. And a lot of the strength that we got is by meeting people that embraced us and understood it's not a political issue. It's a humanitarian issue. It's a terrible crisis, and we had to bring it to some conclusion.
Right. It took 2 years. First of all, for 14 months, we didn't know what happened to our son. And we did everything that we could to bring him back alive. Unfortunately, after 14 months, we were notified that he was actually murdered on October 7th. And his body was still held hostage, and we couldn't stop. For us, it was not an option to just leave his remains in Gaza. He deserved a proper burial, a respectable one. And, our mission kept us going, and the support of the communities that rallied around us and the other families that became our own families. And thank God, we can say in summer 2026, there are no more hostages in Gaza.
Yeah.
So that episode is over. And but now we're left, with the task of continuing our son's legacy and his light in the world, because in his short life, he did a lot. He was a leader within his local communities here in the United States, and also when he moved to Israel, he continued with that, being an active leader in the community and in his service as well. So, we feel tasked by that, and that is our mission.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that point, because here, 21-year-old young man living in the United States, growing up on Long Island, and he decides, he's going to go to Israel, and he becomes an IDF tank commander. What was that conversation like with you when he even suggested that he would want to leave the U.S. to go to Israel?
We really love Israel, and he grew up in a community that really cares about the two countries, about the friendship, about the connection. And Omer came to a conclusion that you can't just talk the talk, you have to walk the walk. And he said, we got to protect that land. It's precious.
We have both Ronen's father and my father are Holocaust survivors. Right. And, Omer grew up with an understanding that the Jewish state is a necessity for the Jewish people, that it has to be a strong country that is able to protect and provide respite for the Jewish people. And he was a person, that took action. He is a person of service. He did whatever is needed. Initially, he went to Israel to visit the family. We have a very big family over there, and coming to know his peers, the same age group in Israel. In Israel, military service is mandatory. That's the situation. It's a country that needs to protect itself every single day, and October 7th just proved that, and everything that has happened since. And he just felt that he couldn't just go back to college. He did it. He felt he needed to do his share in supporting Israel. He never felt there was any conflict with his American identity. Israel is one of the biggest allies of the United States and represented Western values in the region. Everything came together for him. It was not. It was the right thing to do for him. So.
Wow.
Talk about, I know many people are remembering this week Senator Lindsey Graham. You met with him. Can you talk about that?
Yes, Senator Lindsey Graham was one of the first senators who understood the extent of the crisis in the Middle East, who understood and spoke about the Iran reasoning of pushing Hamas for the October 7 in order to avoid normalization with Saudi Arabia. He was one of the first senators to lead a delegation, a bipartisan delegation of senators to Israel. Over 10 senators came by, five Republicans and 5 Democrats, and met with the families to hear our voices and to put all the pressure on the players in the area to reach an agreement with Hamas, put the pressure on them to release them. He was very, very vocal about that, and we'll never forget the fact that he stood with us.
So Senator Graham, this was a Biden administration, a Democratic administration, and Senator Graham said, I am here for the cause. This is not a partisan issue. I have a role here. I've told the president that I will do whatever is needed, and he led this delegation to Israel, to Saudi Arabia, to the different players in the region, trying to save, what was going to be normalization before October 7th in the region. And he said, this is really, the way I see it, your chance also of getting your family members back home. And I'm going to do everything I can. With all the constraints of an election year, mind you, that was a difficult time, to do things like that. And, he was a person that gave us hope at that point in time. Unfortunately, during that time frame, it didn't happen.
Right. You have another son, Daniel, correct? Omer's brother?
Yes.
Am I correct with that? How did this impact Daniel? Did it stir something inside of him as well? How did he respond to this whole ordeal?
Well, our second son, Daniel, was just a freshman in university. And, a month in, he's in his dorms. And I'm calling him early in the morning, October 7th, and saying, I think something happened to Omer. We can't get a hold of him. And he was sitting all day on the internet, and he saw a video of Omer's tank and Omer being abducted. He thought he recognized him. It was horrible. And it took us a couple of days to understand that he won't be able to stay in university. Nobody around him understood what was going on, with him. And we brought him home, and for 2 years he was with us multiple times in Washington, speaking in Congress, advocating for the release of the hostages. And only recently he went back to school, even though he managed to learn from home. We don't know how he did it, but he did. And we're so proud of him. And we just hope that he can rebuild and continue with his life. But it definitely impacted him.
And he's definitely, living whatever is happening right now on college campuses and in the United States in general, right? The response to Israel, there's a lot of very disturbing trends these days, the anti-Semitism that is rising. He's a contemporary, right, of this generation. And, of course, he has his own view. I can't speak for him.
Yeah.
But he's dealing with his own personal family issues and, with whatever they're dealing with as young Jewish people and Americans here right now.
We're going to take a break, but when we come back, I want to, Ronen, I spoke to you earlier, and you mentioned how you both met with Presidents Biden and Trump. And I want to hear about those meetings because it made a big difference in the release of hostages.
Right. So stay tuned. We'll be continuing our conversation right here on Red Apple Radio Networks, The Rev and the Rabbi.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
We are speaking with Ronen and Orna Neutra, who tragically lost his son, Omer, who was murdered in Gaza. He was taken hostage and murdered shortly thereafter. You met two presidents, Biden and Trump. And Ronen, I want to talk about that because, you can meet someone and it can be purely ceremonial. It can be very superficial, but it has to be very different when you're meeting a family who has endured this kind of pain. Ronen, Orna?
Yes. Well, I don't know if I ever told you this, but on October 15, 2023, we got a phone call from President Trump. At the time, he wasn't president. President Biden was the president. It was an ex-president, and he still called us just to say that he heard about what happened to us from a colleague, and he wanted to express his concern and said that he's on it. And at the time, a week into the war, we told President Trump that it is really one of the largest humanitarian issues, and it has to stay bipartisan. And we urged him to work with the current administration at the time, President Biden, and not make it into a political issue. And he promised us that. And a few weeks later, we've been to the White House and we met with the Biden administration, and there was a cadence of meetings with Jake Sullivan and Brett McGurk at the White House, and then we met as well with President Biden. And really the warmth and the fact that we felt that they cared about it and they really wanted to release the hostages was felt through the Biden administration, and they managed to release the women and the children.
For us, it was clear that this cannot turn into a bipartisan issue. It was an election year, and we realized that if this was going to become a partisan issue, it would work against us, and we needed to do everything possible to keep it bipartisan. We always made sure to meet with senators, congressmen from both sides of the aisle, and keep them engaged and ask for their support. And I don't think we've ever had anybody not agree to meet with us or not show compassion and want to be helpful. Some were more action oriented than others. And we're more involved, but from both parties, really. And it was an art, to keep that going during an election year to make sure. And you can see once President Trump was elected, we were invited to meet with, at the time, Jake Sullivan and Brett McGurk that were in charge of the negotiations for our last meeting. And we said to them, listen, we cannot afford 40 days of halts, nothing happening with the hostage situation before President Trump is inaugurated. We need you to pass the torch in an order, please, work with the new administration and make sure that it happens. And they brought that up to President Biden. The next day we were with President Biden in the Oval Office, and he said, President Trump was here this morning, and I passed on your request. And his team will work with my team, and we know that happened.
At the day President Trump was inaugurated, hostages came out. And since then, we saw a very dedicated Trump administration and President Trump himself to make sure that nobody stays behind. And I think, to our surprise and everybody's surprises, all the hostages came out, the deceased and the live hostages. And I think it surprised a lot of people. But we saw the level of commitment. We saw how important it was for President Trump. And I think that the result is what we've all seen. Everybody's back. And, we didn't get Omer the way we wanted him. He was murdered. But we got his body, which was very important for us. And we told President Trump multiple times, the deceased must come back to their families. They need a grave.
Yeah.
And it took collaboration, if I may comment, because the President Trump is surrounded by Christian evangelicals who are very strong in their commitment to Israel and the Jewish people. So that was I know
Absolutely.
the majority of them, and that was very important because they kept putting pressure on the president to make sure he stayed
That's
involved.
very true. And that's
yeah.
very true.
Mhm.
Actually, we were invited to come and speak at the RNC, which was the launch of the Republican campaign. And this was by the CEO of a conservative group, Concerned Women for America.
Of America, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Of America. And they were in touch with us, and they really wanted to make sure that the hostage situation was brought to the world stage. And they're the ones that invited us to come and speak. And we've been, we were at the CUFI National Conference multiple times.
Christians United for
Israel, and many other hostages and hostage families spoke at those conferences. And I believe that, the fact that the evangelical community, was supporting us and made sure that that this issue was kept front and center was critical.
One of the most
in the Trump administration. Yeah.
One of the most lasting memories that Reverend and I have is sitting with you at the Cardinal, then was Cardinal Dolan, and we have Archbishop Hicks, but sitting with you at the Cardinal's residence, and he spoke to you and spoke of your son as our son, he's with us, he's from us.
Local boy, he called us,
local boy, yeah.
Yeah. And then people prayed with you and for you. And I was afraid that, oh my God, they're going to leave. They're going to go to another faith now, these people. It was just so welcoming. But it was a remarkable moment. And I think one of the things you've learned is that goodness transcends denomination, right? There are good people on all different sides.
Moral clarity.
Yeah.
Moral clarity transcends denominations. And I think that's what we experienced for sure from Cardinal Dolan and many other groups and individuals that we met with. I think they could see, the tragedy of what happened and empathize with us. I think the Cardinal, he got it. He said, this is a kid that grew up here. It could have been someone else's kid,
Right.
It really touched him, and we felt his support. He's really a unique human being, really.
He is. Well, it's an honor to know you, and I've been with you a number of times. We even honored you at the New York Board of Rabbis event this year. You're very special people, and you've acquired a large family now because Christians, Jews, I know Muslim people who really stand with you. So let's, maybe in Omer's memory, let's try to keep people closer to one another because we're too divided in this world.
We are too divided, and most of us want the same thing: peace, unity, and love each other. And really, it's the people we met throughout this journey.
And you're absolutely right. It's the spirit of Omer. Omer was a bridge builder wherever he went. He was the regional president of his youth group, and in his senior year, before he left the position, that's what he chose to talk about. He said, it's not enough to have fun for yourself. Look around the room, see the people that are, on the outskirts that maybe don't have a friend, that don't feel so comfortable. Bring them into the fold. Make sure that they're having a good time too. He was a true bridge builder wherever he went. And in his spirit, we promise to continue doing that in his name.
As we close, people listen to us for perspectives on current events, but also for our spirituality and what we bring united. What does the word hope, mean to you after all of this?
Hope is something that you got to work toward. It's not something that you got to wait for. If we learn something through this process, is that even common people like us can make a difference. We were driven by our son's story and by his legacy. We knew there are lives on stake. It really drove us every day to ask the question, what should we do today to bring them home? But
beautiful.
We had to act. And you got to be hopeful, but you got to bring hope by acting toward a better future.
And you did.
Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hope is not a noun, it's a verb. It's an action word.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
That's exactly that. Thank you.
Thank you
And
so
thank
much
you.
for being on the program. Yeah. Always good to have you. And thank you for the conversation.